This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is a twofer here. This is the 12-inch MacBook, sometimes called the Retina MacBook. Second generation this time around. We have it obviously in the new rose gold color that is, well, it's beautiful, I think. You may feel differently. And here we have space gray. And you know what? Actually, this one is a previous generation model. This is the second generation model. And that just goes to show you that nothing has changed physically between these two. You get the exact same casing, you get the same ports, you get the same bizarro keyboard on here, the same really awesome Retina display. So what's new? We're going to find out now. Fear not, gents. It's not just available in rose gold, though I think it looks rather fetching. I was not much on rose gold on the iPad, but this I think looks pretty nice. The curves help. It's an interesting, complex color. But there we go. You see, we have space gray there. We still have silver. We still have regular gold for those of you who are into other colors. What's changed? Only stuff on the inside. We moved to the Intel 6th generation Skylake Core M family of CPUs. RAM got a little faster, moved up to 1866 megahertz. Still DDR3 because that's a Skylake limitation. You can't blame Apple for that one. PCIe protocol is quicker. We go up to V3 from V2, so SSD speeds are even quicker on this. The same strange butterfly keyboard, we'll talk about that a little bit. Same really lovely display. Really nothing needs to be changed there. It's one of the best displays. Port constrained 480p webcam, you bet. That's the canoodle that is the 12-inch MacBook. Okay, so we've covered what's new here. Basically, this guy is a little bit faster than last year's model. That's what tends to happen with laptops and computers in general. Price point stays the same. Starting is $12.99 US. That gets you the Core M3 Intel Skylake generation, 8 gigs of RAM, a 256 gig SSD. For $250 additional, that makes it $1549. You can go with the Core M7, and that will be actually a pretty significant performance boost, most likely, given how the Core M5 shows significant benchmark differences, and you're still staying at the 256 gig SSD. Or you can go with that somewhere in the middle model there, say you need more storage. For $1599, you can get the Core M5 with a 512 gig SSD for those of you who need more storage, and you're still going to see a nice little performance bump there. But even our base model, 1.1 gigahertz, is actually pretty decent on speed tests. If you have a several years old MacBook Air, this will benchmark the same. That's how much processors have improved. And let's get one thing clear here, folks. I know we're going to have screams of overpriced netbook and all that sort of thing. Netbooks run on Intel Atom CPUs. They always have. They probably will continue to do so. They have cheesy plastic chassis. They have low-resolution displays. None of that is what this is. This may be overpriced indeed for what you get in terms of horsepower and all that sort of thing, but it is not a netbook. The Core M CPU gets a bum rap, and honestly, with the 6th generation Skylake and OS improvements in both Windows 10 and in Mac OS 10, we've seen some very good benchmark numbers. The Core M5 on this has benchmarked as well as the 2015 MacBook Air 13-inch. And here is some early benchmarks for folks who have gotten their Core M5 models, and these numbers are indeed the same as the 13-inch 2015 MacBook Air, which granted is running on Broadwell, but it still gets some pretty good numbers, that being the 5th generation CPU, because Apple just will never, ever update the Air, will they? Hello? Now we have the Core M3, which is the base model, the most affordable, and I'll show you what our Geekbench score is. And there's our Geekbench score for our 2nd generation base model with the Core M3 CPU. Those are respectable numbers that actually are not that far off from somewhere between Core i3 and Core i5 performance. So back to this is not a netbook thing. Core M's just in general aren't. If you take a look at the gamut of laptops running Core M and tablets, most of these of course are in the Windows world. We've reviewed just about all of them. They are never cheap products. That CPU, the Core M's, cost about as much as the Core i family. So for manufacturers, they're not putting these in to save any money. They're putting them in because they are the lower power fanless alternative. So they're good for incredible small light designs, tablets, that sort of thing. The Toshiba Portage Z20T, a 2-in-1 tablet, for example, runs on Core M. The HP EliteBook Folio, a business ultrabook with a 12.5-inch screen, running around $12.99 for a similar configuration here. Again, has the Intel Core M. The base model Surface Pro 4 has the Core M CPU in it. These are not cheap machines. One of the few very reasonably priced machines is the Asus ZenBook UX305. Asus specializes in finding a way to make these things affordable, but it will have a lower resolution display. Speaking of display, it's the same display as the last generation, and I'm not complaining. I really like this display. It's almost 350 nits in brightness. It has an excellent 860:1 contrast ratio, pretty good black levels, 0.41 when it's running at maximum brightness. Gamma is perfect, and the calibration out of the box is so good that after calibrating with the hardware colorimeter, I couldn't tell the difference. This is a 2304 by 1440 pixel display. Apple calls that Retina resolution. It's pretty high DPI. It's really sharp. It's not terribly reflective, though. It's glossy, of course, because this is Mac OS X. It does not have a touchscreen. I would say one of the biggest selling points over the 11-inch MacBook Air, or even the 13-inch, if you want to spend as much money as this costs, would be the improvement in display quality. While the Air's TN panel is just looking so sad these days, this is super stunning. And another thing, horsepower has improved with Skylake. There's a nice 15 to 20% improvement in performance over the 5th generation that we had in the Gen 1 laptop. Also, we get Intel HD 515 graphics here. That made a bigger jump, up to 25%. So our little so-called, some would say, oh, that's just an underpowered little netbook, is here running Photoshop CC, and it has absolutely no problems at all doing that. But not only that, I happen to have Final Cut running in the background as well. So, boy, isn't that something? And it is absolutely responsive. And let's do an export here just to see. This is a 1080p XAVC-S file. So that's a 50 megabit per second file. That is actually a pretty darned beefy file. So I'm going to export this file, and this is about a minute long, and I'm going to, instead of sending it out via ProRes, I'm going to send it to H.264 because it actually may have to work a little harder to downsize the video that much. And we'll leave it at QuickTime Movie. That's absolutely fine, so we'll let it do that. So our 1 minute file took about a minute. So that's pretty much real-time export, exporting 1080p video, high bitrate codec to H.264. Now if you're going to do something like 4K video, expect it to take 2 to 4 times as long. So if you got a 5-minute vid, you may have a 20-minute export time there. Still, that's not exactly underpowered, and I didn't have to kill Photoshop in the background or anything else I was running. It's capable enough. While I might not choose this to be my main machine working with Final Cut every day as we do to put out videos professionally for YouTube, for those of you who have to do it on the road, though, if I had to go to a trade show, I could certainly put up with these speeds. That's very acceptable there. It's obviously fine for MS Office. It's fine for playing Netflix 1080p video. It's fine for Photoshop. What is it not so great for? I'm a photographer. I have hundreds of RAW files in my Lightroom library, and it's okay for, you know, quick field use of Lightroom, but I wouldn't want to use this as my main machine. Lightroom is kind of a pig. It does better with fast storage, and you do have that really fast storage here, but still it can get pretty bogged down if you have a lot of photos to work with. So it wouldn't be my first choice. I would want a MacBook Pro for that sort of use. If you're going to run VMs, virtual machines, yeah, Boot Camp's another thing. Boot Camp's okay, but if you're going to run virtual machines, this doesn't have a lot of horsepower for that sort of thing. You'll notice it getting a bit sluggish doing that. Software development, if you're doing something like Xcode or HTML, web development, it's fine for that sort of thing. If you're compiling iPhone programs, yes, it works for that. Big programs, you're working on a executable for actual Mac OS, yeah, I'd rather have something more powerful. And speaking of fast SSDs, you can see our Blackmagic disk test results scores right here. Those are good speeds, and that's about 200 faster for both reads and writes than the outgoing model, which was no slouch. In daily use, I don't know if you'll notice this, but if you are writing lots of files or large files, you will notice it. Programs launch just even a little bit quicker. So there it is, faster SSD speed time. Certainly Lightroom will appreciate that. Now, for content creation in terms of the keyboard, this is a backlit keyboard. It has butterfly mechanical keys that have almost zero travel. I mean, barely moves at all. It is something you either get used to or you don't. It seems like a lot of people get used to it. I still, even though this has been on the market for a year, one of our senior editors has one, and every time I have to use the keyboard, I'm like, oh God, oh God. I can type okay, and I do make more mistakes than usual, but actually I type pretty well, but I don't think I'll ever enjoy the feel of it. You folks may be different. It is a unique kind of keyboard. The trackpad, on the other hand, the Force Touch trackpad, is as good as ever. You can deep press to get previews of files, get definition of words, that sort of thing. It's equally clicky anywhere. It's not sprung from the top with all the actual clicking going on at the bottom. The trackpad is awesome. And obviously very large. It takes up a huge amount of the keyboard deck's real estate. In terms of upgrading it, typical of a lot of Mac laptops, not much of that going on here. You have your little pentalobe screws here. You can take that bottom off if you absolutely want to, but the point of doing that is pretty limited because the motherboard has more in common with an iPhone than it does with your traditional laptop design. Everything is soldered on board here, so your SSD, your RAM, your wireless card, they are all soldered on. The battery capacity has increased just a little bit, 41.4 watt hours from the outgoing model's 39.7. That is an interesting battery that takes up actually most of the internals here, and it's leaves of battery scattered everywhere throughout. So not something that's easy to replace yourself. Should your battery ever wear out, Apple charges $199 to replace it. As I mentioned, our senior editor has had one for a year, and has gone through 135 discharge cycles, and the battery is still going pretty strong. It shows about 10% wear, which I think is a little bit high, actually, but, well, there it is. Apple says they've increased battery life 1 hour from the previous generation model. That means 10 hours on a charge. Now, here's a tricky thing with machines that have bright displays. If you max the brightness out, you are never going to get 10 hours. You probably won't ever get 9 hours. But if you run it at about 40 or 50% brightness, which is still reasonably bright and it's fine for indoor use, then it certainly is possible if you're doing productivity work, a couple of edits in Photoshop, streaming some Netflix video or Amazon Prime Video, whatever it is you like to do. If you're doing Final Cut, edits and export, if you're compiling a lot of code, obviously, or playing games, not that this is a gaming laptop, you will get shorter run times. But Apple's usually pretty close to correct on their battery estimates, and 10 hours is pretty fair, again, if you're careful with how much brightness you're using, and again, depending on what kind of programs you're running at the time. There are other ultra-portable competitors on the market. We recently reviewed the Samsung Notebook 9 13-inch. We'll be doing the 15-inch. There's the LG Gram models. All of those have even shorter battery life. So for those of you who are saying 10 hours a year, well, I only get 8, that's still going to be better than the competition out there, honestly. And speaking of the competition, here it is sitting on top of the Samsung Notebook 9. This is the 15-inch model, Core i7 CPU. You go, Samsung. But bigger footprint. Notice that. That's how they managed to get more ports and room for the fan that is required for a Core i5, i7, even i3 CPU. The Mac, of course, is fanless and is silent, but the Samsung obviously has a lot more horsepower. Now, that's a 15-inch, so of course it's going to have a bigger footprint. The 13.3-inch Samsung is more of a direct competitor. It still has a pretty typical 13.3-inch footprint, but it would be smaller than the 15-inch. It also has a backlit keyboard like the Mac does. The 15-inch does not. Both size Samsungs have lots of ports, but only the 15-inch has a USB-C port on it. The 13.3-inch doesn't for some reason, but it's got ports, it's got card readers, so take that. For those of you who were wondering, the Samsung Notebook 9 starts at $999 for the 13.3-inch and is $1199 for the 15-inch. And wiggling its way into yet another review is the Dell XPS 13, one of the Windows Ultrabooks. It's hard to beat. Conventional laptop design, you can get it with or without a touchscreen. It's a 13.3-inch machine that has more like a 12-inch footprint. So this is one of the smallest you can get. It weighs around 2.8 pounds or so versus 2 pounds for the MacBook. And lastly, we have a conventional 13.3-inch convertible Ultrabook. This is a Dell Inspiron 13-inch size. Quite different in size, and it weighs almost twice as much as the 12-inch MacBook. So you get an idea of the portability difference between these devices. The Inspiron is actually quite a bargain, very affordably priced, but it's bigger and it's heavier too. So it really depends on what you need and how much you can spend. And let's talk about gotchas and limitations. The webcam is still a paltry 480p. Apparently they can't get a 720p module thin enough to fit in the very thin lid. The lid is very thin, by the way, but it's extremely rigid. There's still just one USB-C 3.1 port. That is Gen A. So yes, it can drive peripherals, but you're going to use dongles up the wazoo. And there is only one port, and it also handles charging. So if you don't get a dongle adapter that splits, you can also charge. Well, you're going to either be using your dongle and whatever's connected or charging, but not both. Apple, of course, has the AV adapter. We have a DisplayPort adapter right here. This works just fine. You can connect a monitor up to 4K resolution, but only at 30 Hertz, not at 60 Hertz. What's it with Apple and this 30 Hertz limitation on so many of their models? I did test it on our 4K monitor. It does work, again, at 30 Hertz, and you can get it at 60 Hertz at lower resolutions if you have a 1440p monitor. We have HDMI adapters. We have multifunction ones. Several companies make these. Some of them have pass-through power, so you can charge at the same time. This one adds 3 USB 3.0 ports, full-size SD card, and a micro SD card slot. And then there are USB-C to USB-A standard adapters, which is what we have our PlayStation controller plugged into, because we are doing PS4 remote play here. This laptop might not have the brains to go and play killer games on its own, but it can do PS4 remote play like nobody's business. It's pretty darn cool. And the speakers, as ever, on this little laptop are better, louder, fuller, and richer than many laptops that are considerably larger. So let's check out Until Dawn. Man, that is some nice sound there. And we're about 25 feet from the nearest wireless access point, and it's still playing just fine right now. So if you do have a PS4, there's some hope for some pretty high quality gaming, even on a little laptop like this. Wild, right? One scary game, by the way, if you haven't played it. So that's the second generation 2016 MacBook, 12-inch in size, 2 pounds in weight, trivially small, the size just about of an iPad Air, 9.7-inch. And it is an engineering marvel. It's an expensive engineering marvel, like I said. And in the first review, I said the same thing. You got to have money to play, certainly with this one. And I think that's part of what makes people so angry, is because, of course, everybody would like to have one of these, probably, unless you really detest Macs that much. But the price is, well, it's prohibitive for some people. But if you can't afford it and you want the smallest, lightest, but still actually decently performing Mac, this would definitely be it. And it puts the MacBook Air displays to shame. Someday, please, Apple, either kill the Air or finally update it, because those TN panels and lower resolutions are just not nice, including against the Windows competition. But anyway, it's a fine machine. It's an expensive machine. It's an awesome second machine for those of you who have an iMac or a 15-inch MacBook Pro hooked up to so much gear you don't even want to unplug it and take it with you anywhere. I'm not sure this is going to bring a lot of Windows people over, because there's a lot of fine Windows Ultrabooks, granted not with this small a footprint, but very thin and very light as well. As always, Apple gives us choice. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to visit our website for the full written review of the second generation model, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos.